Hey everybody, Patty the Tinkerer's wife here. I want to thank you for joining me today. It is Tuesday, it is time for another video, and today I'm going to attempt the 5 life changes, or excuse me, 5 life changing events challenge, or the 5 LCE challenge that Bob over at Getting Started on Homesteading put out. This was an open challenge. I don't know if he tagged people. I know he mentioned it was an open challenge, so I decided I'd take him on. And I'm going to attempt this challenge, and hopefully I'll make it through without becoming a puddle on the floor. Things that change our lives are good and bad. So get ready for the roller coaster. Here we go. And before we do that, I just want to say, those of you who are new, I do really appreciate you being here today. And those of you that are here and have been longtime subscribers, thank you so much. And the rest of you too. You mean a lot to me. You are the reason I am here. This is not just for myself. I could say, well, it gives me a format for where I can share all the things I know so my brain doesn't implode. And part of that's true. I do need a place to share. It is who I am. But it is because of you that I am here. Because without you, this wouldn't mean anything. So anyhow, back to the challenge. I have been going over in my head trying to figure out what I was going to say because my life has been challenging. And it has had high moments and low moments, and there's been quite a few low moments. But I am going to, I'm going to try and make this as positive as I can. And let's see. I would say number one, I am going to say was when we moved from Boise to Clackamas County, Oregon. Boise, Idaho to Clackamas County, Oregon. I was 12. I had come from a school district that I'd been in my entire school life, I think, except for my first grade class. And there were things, beliefs that they had, that system had, that teachers had written down that were wrong about me. And when we moved, after I was in school here for a year, 7th grade, the district here realized that I had been misjudged, that they had, I don't know, I'd gone through a lot in grade school, and it was a very tumultuous time for me, and I didn't know how to process what I was experiencing or feeling and things I was experiencing at home, and my mom was overwhelmed and couldn't help me. My dad was a man who had his own wounds and did the very best he could. But he was working and gone a lot, almost all the time. So I was left alone, really, emotionally, in a lot of ways. And I was angry and I was hurt and all those things. And I was a kid and I had no way of knowing how to process them. So when we moved, I had, in my grade school years, these ways that I had acted out, like, well, I actually forgot to do assignments and believed that I had done them. I remember this in the 3rd grade, and all kinds of things, I wasn't able to focus on school and do the level of work that I was capable of. And when I got here to Oregon, that first year was brutal. It rained all the time, and it was a cold, wet summer, and well, not cold and wet all summer long. That's a lie. It's never cold and wet all summer here. We actually have beautiful summers. But it was a little chillier than normal, it was a little wetter than normal, but we still had plenty of time to go swimming. And but getting into school, after that first year here, the district reevaluated my capabilities, and I went from being in the second to the lowest core class to the second to the highest core class in grade level kind of thing. So they recognized that I was smart. That was huge. That was life-changing for me, to have somebody recognize that I wasn't this turtle, which my third grade teacher called me her little turtle. And that was because I was so overwhelmed emotionally at home that I wasn't getting my work in. It was just too chaotic. So anyway, and there was other things that went on in grade school. But with that said, Mr. Altig was my core teacher in 8th grade and just encouraged me a lot. And I was allowed to go into algebra a year early. In my freshman year, I was in a AA English class. My instructor asked me if I'd ever thought about becoming a journalist. All these things happened that just really were formulative into me becoming who I am today. So that was life-changing. Oh, let's see. Another life-changing event, and I'm going to preface this by saying I married right out of high school. I married right out of high school, and I did it as a rebellious thing just to get out of the house. I married somebody my parents didn't want me to marry. They knew he wasn't right for me. My mom tried her very best, and in love came to me in the hallway and asked me not to do it. And I just went ahead and did it anyway. Well, because of that marriage, I have my wonderful son, Samuel. Sam, Mr. Sam, Sam the man, Sam, my right-hand man, because he's my help out here right now as we're going through Ben's things. So yeah, my son was born, and actually he was an answer to prayer because I had specifically asked God to give my husband a son. And I did that in response to reading about Hannah, Samuel's mother, the prophet Samuel in the Old Testament. And I somehow knew that God would hear me. I didn't really have much of a relationship with him back then. Well, I knew he was real, but I was like the furthest from a Christian, really. I knew about the Bible, I knew about Jesus, I knew why Jesus died, all those things, but I didn't really have any faith. This was probably the first act of faith I had. And you know what? God rubber stamped that thing and gave my husband, Dennis, my first husband, Samuel, as a son. And Dennis got to raise Samuel. Because after a year and a half, things went really south in our marriage. I just couldn't do it anymore. And I took off running again. And I left Samuel in his dad's care because I knew that was the best place for him. That was hard. And that was life-changing thing number three. Number three. Yeah. Number 3. I got married to Dennis, had Sam, and then I left Sam behind. Okay, that's 3 right there. That was my first real grief in my life. And all of these things kind of happen in a short span of time, really, when you consider I'm going to be 64 in April. And these were all things that happened in my late teens and 20s, so in the first 6 years of young adulthood. The next thing that happened was I moved in with, right away, I moved in with a man named Gary, who was involved in drugs. I didn't know that he was still involved with them. He did have some shady friends, and I was just stupid. I was brokenhearted from losing my son. He had talked me into moving in with him, had helped me move out of the house with Dennis while Dennis was at work. All these things. I mean, he was manipulating me, basically. He was a manipulator. And a lot of people who use drugs are. Had he not been a drug user, he would have been a great guy. But as things go, when you're on drugs, you're not the person you normally are. So anyway, that relationship, after about 1 year and 3 months, went really bad. He drank himself stupid, tried raping me one night. I ended up on the floor in tears with him passed out on the bed and crying out to God, "You've got to help me. You've got to get me out of here. I've made such a mess of my life. Forgive me." Basically, that was it. That's what I said. And I remember going into the other room and getting into the other bed. He was still in the other room, and I just crashed. And I got up the next day, went to work, didn't say 2 words to him, I don't think. Ended up that I wore something to work that was inappropriate, and if my the lead of my department came up, and she was a friend of mine and had always been a friendly person towards me, and she confronted me about my clothes. And I did not know when she confronted me what was going to happen. I did not know if I was going to be asked to go home or whatever. And the next thing out of her mouth was, she goes, "I must tell you that the reason I'm letting you know about this is because I care about you. I'm a Christian. And I know that something's wrong." And I looked at her and I just bust out crying. And I said, "You're an answer to prayer." And I told her what happened the night before. And she was the person God used to get me out of that very bad situation and get me going on the right track. And I gave my life to the Lord. I got baptized. I was out of that live-in situation in 3 days and began walking as a Christian. So that was number 4. Number 5 is a hard one for me. It was something that changed my life in a way that was, it changed me. We all have those people that are kind of our cheerleaders, those people who are safe places. Well, for me, that was my mother. And when I was 25, my son was with me this weekend, and where I lived in this household with a bunch of other people. And we'd gotten home from church, and the phone rang, and it was my dad. And my mother was in the hospital. Her heart wasn't working right, but she had been resting, and she'd eaten something and was doing fine. So go ahead and eat your dinner, and and we had an early dinner, like at 1 o'clock. So I ate and just got done and was putting the dishes in the kitchen, and the phone rang again. And the next thing I know, here comes my roommate, and she asked me to come into the bedroom, and she gave me the news. My mother at 58 had died. She had a valve in her heart that nobody knew was damaged since birth. It was something that she was born with, and it failed. I didn't get to say goodbye to her, and I was alone in the world, it felt like. I knew my dad loved me, but he was emotionally unable to support me the way Mom did. He had his own wounds and things, and it was really hard. It was very hard. But I realized how much over the years Mom had invested in me. And over the years I realized how much I am like her. And for that I'm grateful. And I can see her in my younger brother Randy, who is my closest sibling. My older brother Mark bears some of her gifts too, in his graphic arts design capabilities. Yeah, so it's really nice to see those portions of her. But she was the person who made sure I got into an all city choir. She was the one when I was in sixth grade. It was a big choir, and I was one of the few uh, that got in the city that we were in, and had to try out for it. So it was a big deal. She was the one who was always there for me, supporting me, even when I did stupid things like marrying my ex-husband, which was neither family wanted us to get married, but she was right there, supporting me and loving me in spite of me being an idiot. She was the one who prayed for me the whole time when I was living with Gary. When I was living with that man who was on drugs and trying to hide it and drinking because he was so ashamed. She was praying for me. She'd cry. Come and visit, and then she'd go home and cry. Dad told me later. But when she died, I literally, I could tell in the way that I thought that it impacted me really deeply in ways I can't even really explain. But she was a woman who loved nature, who, like me, noticed the little things, noticed the intricate beauty, noticed the great grandeur, and saw God's fingerprints in everything. She made sure that we were taken to church. She was the one who invested spiritually in me, her and my grandmother. But anyway, her just making sure we got to church. So yeah, she had a huge impact in my life. So her passing away was huge. It changed me. So yeah, those are my 5 things. There's a lot more that I could talk about, but those are some pretty big ones. But anyway, I'm going to leave this as an open challenge. And I hope that any of you who are content creators, that you will consider taking on this. Some of you young ones, please take this on. Let's see, I think I need to, I don't know. Maybe I'll poke somebody on Instagram or something and get them to do it, but I can't think of anybody right now. I've had a long day. I went to my grief share group and today, and that's a grief support group, and I just got home from it and did this video because it is Tuesday and I got to get a video out on Tuesday, right? Anyway, so yeah. Oh, and by the way, I know a lot of you have watched the video where I take that slug of fire cider. Well, I'm going to redo that. I think I might have said this already. But anyway, I'm going to redo that. Not the whole video, just the slug. Because when I shook it up the next time I took it, and I took a whole shot glass, it made a difference. So I'm going to do that just so Jennifer can see that she's not alone. I still like it. But I've got to do it because I want y'all to see the real deal. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me, for listening to my 5 things, my 5 LCEs, the life-changing events. And I would really love to see other creators, maybe some of you new creators, some of you younger channels take this on. And it's a great way to get to know you and for you to get to know me, that we share these things. We all talk about being real. Well, I mean, how much more real can you get? And sure, there's things you might not want to share, and that's fine. I left a whole lot out, but I shared some things that were pretty tender. You know, what we go through informs who we become, and it helps us to understand one another. So I hope that you'll be encouraged to do that, you know. And anyway, I'm just going to quit talking here. I'm just rambling on. So anyhow, this is Patty, the Tinker's wife, and for today, I am going to say I am signing off, and God bless.